welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this week we are ticking off another box on our must-see horror list. Our list of 100 films that apparently Amazon believes you should watch before you die. And this week we have the next.
You're next.
You're next.
Yeah, well done. At least you fucked it up.
I'm keeping it in. I was there suddenly like, I was going to say you're next. And I don't know why. It's suddenly there.
You know how it is on this podcast.
Where's there next? And I'm keeping this in. I'm not cutting it. So
yeah, well, we just freeball. We
never cut
anything. We just go.
We could completely fuck up mid-episode and just let you listen to silence for an hour.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes maybe that's what happens.
It probably
maybe
is.
That's what people would prefer. You know,
people who check their episodes probably would know that has happened. For us, we'd probably we'll see this viewing figures and be like, it's fine. There was nothing in the episode. It was empty.
We just sign and recline.
It'd be like a year later. If we were making money for this, we'd probably be deemed for fraud because it'd be like, you gave us nothing and we paid for that.
It would be daylight robbery. At least get to a bit more a mask, you know. So obviously Jeff Bezos is the arbiter of what horror films are must see. So we're kind of working through and we're ticking off this list of 100 horrors, and we're kind of deciding whether we think they are must-see horror. We've been through quite a few, maybe 20 or so, and I think generally speaking, most of them we've agreed kind of are must-see. There's been a couple where we've had a little cat fight over whether they are, whether they aren't.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting, this one, because I think a lot of the ones that we've covered have been bigger films. They've also been kind of ones, I think a lot of them maybe pre-2000s.
Yeah.
So this is a bit more of a modern one.
Yeah, I mean, we've said several times that this list has a fairly, where it feels like they've thrown in a few maybe ones that people would think of. A few more modern ones are on that list where a lot of people probably wouldn't have put them on, and this definitely falls within, this is a newer, more modern like slasher that isn't on there. It's got its many classic slashers like Halloween, Scream, your go-tos.
It's got all your big bollocks on there.
But there are ones on there that either we've both said we've never seen, some of which we've been like, what is that? Have we heard of that?
Definitely 2000.
And then there are the ones where you look at it from straight away and go, whoever wrote this list, I'm not entirely sure if they ever watched these films or if they know what they are, but we've got, is it Bird Box or whatever it is?
Bird Box is on there.
But I haven't watched very recent Netflix. I haven't watched it either, but it definitely doesn't scream like classic horror to me.
But then who knows? I mean, this is
that's us. We might watch it and go, you know what? This is a great, great film and deserving of this placement. So that's kind of how this works. We're making. There are many that we have disagreed on, and we've both either gone one way or the other. Will we see that today?
We will keep you in suspense. What I would say though is, unless you want to be next, hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. Usually I try and butter you up. Doesn't seem to be working, so now I'm just threatening you. You will be next if you do not subscribe and leave us a lovely review. That's not that's a promise.
Yeah. You're next.
You're next.
The sequel. Then which I haven't made yet. I just made it up. So now Adam Wingard, you need to go out and make their next. So I seem like less of a fucking idiot.
Yes. So 2011.
Yes. Mr. Adam Wingard, who's gone on to many bigger things after. Well, to be fair, mainly after this film. To be honest, he'd done some bits with your old VHSs and things like that. He'd done some. Obviously he was in the original Blair Witch, part of that kind of group of the original Blair Witch, but was not a big filmmaker until this film. So I'd say that this brought him back into people's attention, making this low budget $1 million horror film.
When he did a film called A Horrible Way to Die, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No, I mean I've heard of it purely from looking at credits, but I have not actually seen the film.
I seem to remember hearing this is the poster. I seem to remember seeing quite.
The poster
a bit,
looks familiar.
Familiar. I remember hearing quite a bit of a kind of like a buzz around it. And then he did Your Next, and then he did a film that we both were really quite big fans of, which was The Guest.
Yeah.
And then he did Blair Witch. Obviously, he did the 2016 one.
Yeah.
He did
not as well
received. And then he did, the best film of all time, which was Godzilla vs. Kong. Followed it up with an absolute hit, Godzilla X Kong now, because everything is now X.
Yeah.
I don't know how. Godzilla times Kong, and that was the new Empire. And his latest film is Onslaught, which kind of looks like he's going back to his action horror kind of thriller roots. So I think, and Mr. Dan Stevens in it, and Alex Pereira,
Dan Stevens obviously is along kind of with The Guest and with the Godzilla and with Onslaught. He's been fun. And as I was looking before, Simon Barrett, the writer who wrote this film, and also wrote several other, or has co-written. So he wrote that Kong X when they gave. After the first Kong, they gave Adam Wingard basically free reign to make it however the hell he wanted to make it last time, I think. He was also meant to make the next one that's coming along, but he's dropped out of that now, and instead he's doing a Thundercats film.
Yeah, I mean...
if you know, that's American animation, so, he's got lots... Oh, he's also doing a Face Off remake.
Nice.
I'm not
Who's
sure...
got to be in that, though?
I mean, if he's not casting Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, I don't see the point.
Face Off again.
I think I have heard it's actually meant to be a sequel reboot kind of thing. So it'll probably be his daughter. Their two daughters are warring, and their daughters are getting faced off.
The daughters are getting faced off.
If anyone's seen that film, it's a film that's so utterly ridiculous, and yet it's one of the greatest action films ever.
Yeah, it's fucking weird.
It's fucking weird. It makes no fucking sense. Even the bone structure of John Travolta versus Nicolas. You could have cast two people that had wildly different faces. I mean, goddamn, John Travolta's got a widescreen face, and Nicolas Cage has he's got the most slender man face you've ever seen.
He's got like viewing on your phone face. Hasn't he?
If you stretch Nicolas Cage's face onto John Travolta, actually, it would look fucking like his mouth would be like
quite reptilian.
Yeah,
he looked like the lizard.
His mouth would be like spreading past his lip area. His freaking eyes would be like bloodshot from all of the underneath vessels around it. He would look,
he looked like the lizard
talking more like
Amazing Spider-Man, wouldn't he?
He literally would look fucking insane. I mean, it's a film I would see.
I would see that, yeah.
Let's go with the realistic face-off and see what happens then.
Let's see what happens there.
They're just screaming in pain from the blood vessels and arteries that are exposed the entire film because it doesn't fit. Or Nicolas Cage walking around with flabby John Travolta face on,
flabby face,
which doesn't fit properly.
We'll probably die now because we've insulted Scientology.
But anyway, Mr. Adam Wingard apparently is the person who finally wants to pull off that sequel that people have wanted. So,
I don't blame him.
He's got a busy thing, and I'm not saying that his films are perfect, his films, even like the Godzilla ones, are firmly tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
They are firmly
tongue-in-cheek.
They are absolutely fucking ridiculous. So maybe he is the person to direct that sequel because he's very much in the ridiculous. He's got a kind of dark humour that he likes.
Yeah.
And it's evident within this film as well. That kind of odd kind of, joking around, the way that he plays with the bodies and stuff like that. In the very opening of the film, you've got this, obviously you've got the setup with the two partners that are inside of
they're on the job, because it opens up and it kind of gets straight into it. And this is I think maybe the third time I've watched this, and I remember getting the Blu-ray when it came out, and it does definitely have kind of like a cult status. A lot of people do appreciate the film. I remember it being more horror comedy than it actually was. I actually think that it has some moments of kind of like black humour, but it's not quite. I know we recently covered The Monkey, which was very tongue-in-cheek, firmly black comedy. There's some moments in this, but I actually found that most of it was relatively straight-laced.
It is mainly quite a straightforward, slasher, quite. Which I think this is one of those ones where a lot of the setup, I can see why it wouldn't quite work so well. If he had gone more into the comedy, I'm not sure if some of it would have played out quite so clearly.
I kind of feel like I watched it and I remember enjoying it more because I remember there being more moments of levity. And then watching it back, I was like, it's surprisingly straight-laced, but also it's quite a callous film in moments, and it does play with your expectations. But there were just some bits where I was like, they've just skipped over just how horrid some of this stuff would actually be. You know? Like when you sit there and you think about it, you hear what the film is and you're like, oh, that's right. But then when you watch it, you're like, fuck, some of this stuff is really fucking grim. And I don't know what it was, but I watched it and I was like, That's so grim. I will get to those when we get there.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, like, obviously, there is a set of characters that you can't really say are likable characters.
No,
it's quite it's one of these like emotionally repressed families who don't really ever properly share what they're ever thinking or feeling. Not that ever gets fully it doesn't really unwind that properly because most of them are dead by the point you've got any levity for that to happen.
But you've got some. I think like I'm kind of like looking through the cast list now. So you've got from Australia, Shani Vinson, who I actually have seen in Bait 3D, which is quite an enjoyable little shark film if you haven't watched it.
What 3D?
Bait 3D.
Bait 3D.
Yes,
okay.
Masturbate 3D.
Masturbate 3D.
So it's basically like this underground shopping centre, and there's a storm in Australia, and then obviously it floods, and because it's Australia, there's a shark, and everything's trying to kill them. So they're trapped in this area trying to get out.
Eye popping 3D.
And eye popping 3D. I'm terrified of sharks and water like that. And shopping malls. So for me, and Australians. So for me, it was a 4-in-1 horror film. But then you've got Nicholas Tucci, who I was wondering whether he was related to Stanley, but he's not. Tucci. He's passed away.
Okay.
Yeah, he plays Felix.
Okay.
And then you've got AJ Bowen, who I think he's been in a couple of Ty West films, and he's been in a couple of Adam Wingard films. Same as Joe Swanberg, who plays the real kind of dickhead brother. He's a great character.
Yeah,
he's an absolute fucking prick. And you've got Ty West, who makes a little kind of appearance. And then I think the main one that I thought was nice because she's kind of a legend was Barbara Crampton. It's always nice to see Barb's kind of rock up in something, and she plays Mama. Aubrey Davison. I mean, it quickly kind of assembles all of the people. We do get the opening kill where this
girl coming out of the shower. Yeah, she puts on the music, and we get that song repeated throughout the film. Is it Billy Joel? No, I don't think so. It's a lot more modern than that, isn't it? It's like you used to think about it's like that. It's repeating. I meant to say exactly what that song is.
Yeah.
I thought it was a much more modern kind of song.
It probably is. I think I just have Billy Joel in my head because I'm listening. I've got like I listen to a gym playlist sometimes, and one of them is classic rock, and it keeps coming up every now and then with Billy Joel, and I'm like, I don't want to be pumping iron to Billy Joel. Come on.
Looking for the Magic by the Dwight Twiley Band. I've never heard of them, but the song is catchy. It gets stuck in your head, and it gets repeated enough in this. The opening definitely gets repeated enough.
I've heard heavily inspired by Billy Joel. Just to save face there. So you get. I mean, it kind of sets the opening up pretty nicely. I think. It sets up that we get these kind of killer mass. Well, you get the blood, the hit and the blood splatter and the "you're next" kind of thing, and it's nice. And I like the way though with this scene is that it's set up, but it's revisited like several times later on in the film. Yeah. So we get kind of to come back to that, and what is that scene like when you've got like just these dead bodies just left while the families, this is the. As we find out, this is the only place that is close to the main manor house of this very rich, fucking massive house.
Yeah, a little mansion family. So as we kind of arrive there, as we kind of follow the perspective of the main character, you've got the Erin,
who I think she's a really good final girl. I think However, there's always something that does kind of just does irk me about the film, and that is I think she puts in a great performance. I love that she is absolutely badass, and I love that that's a little twist within the film, because we get the setup is this rich family come together. There's all of these underlying tensions between the family. Her boyfriend was her professor, and he's like kind of broke at the moment because he can't get like a grant, or he can't get something for his
he can't get his work published and things like that.
One of the brothers, the older brother Drake and his wife Kelly, they're just like, Drake is such a fucking bellend. He's played so well. He's so hateable. Well. You know, like anything, he'll make a...
There's never really any let-up in him being unlikable, either.
No.
Like even when it's in the situation when you feel like a character would change, he still doesn't fucking change.
No, he's just a fucking prick.
Yeah.
And his wife's, like, you know, they're always bitching about each other. And then you've got the younger brother, Felix, and his girlfriend, Z, who's this kind of e-girl. And as soon as you see them, you're like, okay. The youngest brother, okay. And his new girlfriend... Okay, who's kind of this moody emo who has this name Z, and you're like, okay, I know what's going on here.
Yeah.
I'm already a step ahead of you. I would have just snapped her neck as soon as they like introduce, snap the neck, get 1-0 up, and then just go from there. And then obviously you get the younger sister and Tarek, who's this filmmaker, and this is a scene that. They get like a dinner scene. I know I'm going on, but
it's fine. We
have to talk.
We're just jumping to set. We'll sit in silence.
We'll sit in silence for 5 minutes and I'll carry on. But there's a great scene that I love where they're all around the dinner table, and you've had these kind of like moments of tension. Yeah. But there's this bit where Drake is just saying like, Drake and Kelly are both talking to Tarek, who's like a filmmaker, and he is a bit pretentious, don't get me wrong.
Oh, he's got his freaking...
He's got the
old scarf around the neck, and he's fucking, he looks pretentious. Douche.
He looks a hipster. And he's talking about how he's made this like documentary, an underground. But then Drake's like, oh, what's an underground film festival? Is it where they only show the films underground? And he's like, I like adverts. They're the best. They're why I watch TV.
Could you not make documentary adverts?
Yeah, and you're just like, wouldn't? It's so frustrating because he's such a bellend. Yeah. And then Crispin and Erin are having a little we're sipping our wine, we're having a little whisper to each other, just enjoying our meal.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Oh, so you were one of her students?" And he's like, "Yeah."
He's literally going for the artery of everyone. He's literally like. Oh, I can pick at you. Apart from his parents, who he's like, I'm the golden boy here.
I'm the golden boy.
Everyone else is like, you are fucking. I'm coming after you and you and you.
I always thought it was Adam Brody who played him because they look quite similar.
I think maybe because in their city's quite similar setup. Ready or Not. Ready or Not. It's quite a similar setup. Yeah.
The Bell End brother, and that's why
he is the Bell End brother in that one.
Yeah, and when I was watching Ready or Not, I was like, to be honest, just to jump around, but I was watching Ready or Not, and when we watched it in the cinema, I was like, oh man, this is the exact same setup as Your Next was. Yeah. Very similar, and it's the same level of comedy. I was like, Your Next was also really...
like maybe exactly. Ready or Not is definitely more comedic than this one.
Exactly. So when I watched this back, I was like, where are the jokes? I was promised a laugh a minute at least, but instead,
I think this one's only got touches of like
dark humor,
but it's not. It's got touches of it, and it's got some of it in like the fact that some ways I feel like in this film, like you're quite often ahead of where they're going with certain things. Not necessarily in the twists, I'd say, but in the more like the deaths and stuff like that. You're all sat there like, we know that this isn't going to go well. Why the fuck are you trying to run out of the house? This is already stupid. Yeah. You're all like, why are you all like? This shows how much as a family you are fucking like, do not have a deep love for each other. The fact that you're like, yes, I'll let even the dad. I'd be like, as a dad, you're thinking, I'm not fucking let my daughter run out into the fucking. The chances is going to get fucking blasted in the head by an arrow. But no.
Well, let's go through getting there. So Tarek. Obviously, during first to go, and I remember this from the trailers because I remember seeing it. And he goes and he looks outside and he sees that there's fucking somebody out there, and then he gets the arrow through the head, which is, I think that's a really good bit. Shit kicks off, and Erin is like,
they start fucking screaming. It's like something out of like. And then there were none from Agatha Christie. They all sat around the table. One of them dies. It's like, holy fuck,
what's going on? I think this is where Drake gets shot in the back as well.
Yeah, he gets an arrow into the back.
And they move out, they scuttle out.
And this is when Erin kicks into, I'm not just...
I'm not just some random Australian.
She's literally, they're all fucking scattering, and she's like, no, get down, get here, right, grab this chair, each of you, one at a time, go, until she goes, and finally an arrow actually makes its way into her chair, and it's like, fuck.
And then this is, we get this kind of we get the great moment where they're in I guess you'd say the lobby or like the reception of the house, because it's fucking huge. And this is where I was with you. I was like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
They're talking. They don't get any cell phone connection, so they're saying, well, like, we need the fastest one of us to get to the car, and then they can whiz off and call the police.
Yeah.
And they're just like, all right, get a running head start and open the door, and we'll open the door at the last minute. And I was thinking, like, no, like, that's a fucking bad idea. You know that people are outside.
It doesn't matter who it is. Any character who's in that, you're like, why? But it's also like the fact that the daughter, it's like, your boyfriend just died, now you're like,
I'm just going to eat out.
Yeah, just let it go. It's out of all of them, out of all the characters that have stood there, like the one also that is probably the least suspicious of anyone, and you're like, why? Why wouldn't the brothers step forward? Or why is the dad not stepping forward to do the if so? Just because she's the fastest doesn't mean she's not going to die as easily.
Yeah. Why don't you all just stay in that one room together?
Why don't you all just go?
Why don't you
all just go into another room and just sort yourself out and, block yourself off for a while. And feel like, nah, we're just going to scatter.
Let's send our young daughter running out into the night by herself.
It's a well set up because, one, I think everyone in the audience is there like, this is not going to go well.
This is a stupid decision.
This is fucking dumb. Everyone in this room, you're being fucking dumb. And also, you obviously clearly, again, prove that you do not actually like each other. Because you would not let anyone do this. If you actually really cared about your daughter, you, the mum or the dad especially, would be like him. They obviously are so distant from their children that they're actually not
fucking run out there.
But I do think that this one is sad because you are totally thinking she's going to run out there and get caught, being arrowed in the head or something like that. So I think the Garrett wire is very well done.
Well, I thought,
and fucking like, fuck.
I thought it was got to be a bit sore, I thought it was got to be. I thought there would be a tripwire and then a shotgun,
Yeah.
That's what I was expecting. But that almost feels like mercy compared to having your throat slit.
The fact that she runs in her own and like literally slats straight into it, and it's like, oh fuck, and you can see how deep her throat's been cut, so you're like, you're fucked. They're all trying to like grab it. It's like, no, it's not going to work. It's too deep.
Fucked.
It could have been any manner of things. Things dropping down, so you're being shot down, and even that, but you may not even have been thinking about the kind of trap parts of it yet, because that's something that kind of plays in a little bit more from this scene. You're like, okay, so they've trapped along the route.
Yeah, you expect something
introduces
to
it.
Yeah.
You expect something to happen, but some people might have been thinking the second they open the door, an arrow's just going to fly straight, smack her down onto the ground. But no, this is almost a little bit more personal, where they all get to literally watch her die. Instead of her being outside and they don't know what happens to her, they straight away get to be like, you guys are trapped here. You guys are stuck. So it's a good way early on to kind of really raise the tension, trying to get out of that room, and there's arrows constantly coming through, so they can't get out of it. This, even trying to enter the door, it's a good way to make them feel like they are trapped inside of their house.
And there isn't really much let up in the film talking about, because it's 94.
There's a lot of, I was going to say, because I think the nice part is because they've got a large family, there's a lot of people to get through, so it allows for a lot of like, I feel like Adam Wingard is very aware that he's like, people just, they want to see a constant array of like deaths in different forms.
Every 7 minutes they want a death, because it's 94 minutes long, and you get Tarek with the arrow through the head, and then almost the next scene you get Amy, and then pretty much after that, that's when Aubrey, Barbara Crampton,
so distraught by the death of her daughter, not distraught enough before to tell her not to do it,
but enough to.
But now she's like, oh my god,
I'm dealing with the consequences of my own
let's
decisions.
take you to bed, mummy, and you have a little sleep, and obviously, because that's exactly. Let's put you in a room by yourself, because this is, there's one thing that definitely can't be said, that although it feels more intentional than the director or the writer being like, you're a fucking, like, why are you making these characters stupid? But I feel like he's intentionally meant to be like, they are so privileged and they are so like distant and kind of cold to each other that they never even take a second thought to think about each other. I think is why a lot of these deaths occur. Less so than like, oh my god, you're just making one fucking stupid decision after another kind of thing. It is, but it also isn't. I feel like there's enough justification for why they do a lot of these things, thinking that, oh, when someone of this privileged nature is unwell, we take them up to their lovely 4-poster bed and we put them into bed, even though there's people outside that are killing them and we don't actually necessarily know where they're going to come from. Let's put you in a room by yourself and let's close the door and walk out. Now, no one sit around with her.
Nobody wait.
No one wait. Maybe father would like to, rest with mother, or maybe father would like to watch mother or look after her. No. Let's all just go outside. We'll all, But
just leave mother to it.
And again, they're all thinking that we need to protect the door because they're thinking they're just coming through the door, not realising that they're actually already in the house.
Which is a great reveal. I love it when you get that shot of kind of Barbara Crampton like lying on bed, crying, and then you see like the arm.
Well, it's a nice wide shot.
Yeah.
So you get to see when the hand
slowly comes out, and it's like fucking hell. Yeah. It's. I think that's so well done, and then he creeps out. And he's so quiet. Yeah. And like he rises up and then he just kind of raises the machete. And it's like the last moment she just sees it. And I like that that's a cut off. Yeah. Because I feel like
that one works fine as a cut. It doesn't need to be a big
you don't need to see
bloody splat, We don't need it. And there's more than enough to go around in this film. We've already had two not very gory deaths. It kind of feels like a hat on a hat at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of done. Now, one thing I didn't want to point out because it's at this point of the film. So you've already mentioned obviously about that. Now, I would say that the first time we watched this film, now I remember watching this film, and again, this was one that I wasn't really aware of, so I wasn't like majorly like into being that bothered about it. I didn't really think there'd be much to it the first time I watched it. And I do remember leaving this being, actually I was pleasantly surprised because I expected this to be a fairly basic kind of affair. And I remember the first time I watched it, I wasn't like, although I knew that lots of odd stuff was going on, I can't say that every character I was like, oh, you're definitely on this, because I was thinking of it more of a standard home invasion thriller. So I wasn't really looking for people to be like, you're in on this, you're in on this. I remember being a bit like, you're a bit odd as a character and stuff like that. But I can definitely say I was not ahead of anyone on the kind of some of the twists in this one. I'm not quite sure why I wasn't ahead on some of the twists, because some of them I felt were actually more glaringly obvious. As I was sat watching it this time, being like, I don't remember like knowing the twist when I came into this film last time, and I don't remember it popping out to me until later. I don't know why, because right now I'm just like, this is so. And the thing was that Charlotte was with me. She didn't watch this whole film. But I was like watching it in bed, and then Charlotte was there, and literally the second the boyfriend, like in this scene after the sister died, he has this really slow, like he seems so distant from everything, and he seems so obviously kind of oddly aware of something. It doesn't seem bothered at all. And Charlotte was like, "Is he on this?" And I was just sat there like, "How the fuck didn't I get this the first time I watched it straight away?"
Because
I don't know why I didn't. I think maybe because I was so forcefully in my head thinking that this was just a standard home invasion, people are coming after the rich people kind of thriller.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it. But the fact that Charlotte like so quickly got there, and I was like, yeah, this is actually way fucking more obvious than I remember it being.
And it's exactly what happened the first time I watched it. Because the first time they introduced you to Z, and I was like, you're behind this. I was like, straight away, I was like, you're obviously behind this. You look like the kind of person who would say, like, eat the rich. Like, that's you, and you talked your boyfriend into doing this. Like, I know your game, Missy. And then when Crispin is revealed to be the murderer, or to be in on it, the first time I was like, oh man, that's a good twist. And then watching it back this time, like the first time he's in the car with Erin, and he's like, my dad just retired, and he's like, he got a massive like payout. And she's like, oh, what did he do? And he's like, oh, he worked in like the military industrial complex. Oh, he was in marketing, but he's fucking loaded now. He's got millions out of it, for his retirement payoff. I was like, okay. And then when they're outside of the barbecue,
they're talking to
each other, and he's like, did you get that grant? And he's like, oh, I didn't get the grant because I haven't been published for a while. And he's like, well, people who haven't been published for a while still get grants. I was like, it is really obvious
that they don't like you. Like there's a strong feeling throughout that like they really just are not like a happy. They're not a unified family. No. They don't have any close feeling, and that comes across the board basically. the only reason some of them are is, again, is either they're chasing daddy's love or they're chasing daddy's money.
Yeah,
and that is mainly what comes across. Mum is quite cold towards most of them. She doesn't seem too greatly bothered.
Fast, yeah.
Even when the daughter dies, part of me still in my head was like, actually, I'm not sure if you're that or just because you're scared for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that's that, because you've shown very little like real emotional connection towards your children. They've all showed up, but you haven't really acted like you're that greatly emotionally bothered by a lot of this stuff. So yeah, it does seem like slightly more of I didn't really think so much about the other brothers because again, so I didn't pick on that because I didn't actually remember the whole Felix and Z part of it. I remembered the Crispin part.
I did the second time.
So once it got to it, I was like there. So again, I didn't. So, but at the same time, I guess that shows some merit that for some reason the first time we watched it, we weren't so onto that.
We were.
So I guess it
we
does
were swindled.
We can't say after watching it the second time and be like, that's a bad twist when we actually got it. When it actually got us the first time, probably for the most part. So I think that it still must work as like a strong, it still did work the first time as a twist, because it's not necessarily what you're expecting. I think
maybe us low IQ men.
Yes, maybe other people kind of did get it, but I guess when you're skewing the home invasion genre, it doesn't. Yeah. Again, this isn't something that's been done many times before, so it still was quite an original idea on a twist.
Yeah.
To be like, actually, the family are, in on it, and the family are willing to do. I think also because of the level of violence that happens towards the family and the people that there's been hired to do it, you're actually like, who would do that level to their family? You know what I mean? Like killing them in like a that kind of way. Killing them in like with I don't know, bloody carbon dioxide poisoning that's been done on purpose, or what I mean, like smothering them in their sleep. Those kind of things. That are kind of more like horrific, but still like kind of not. Slitting their throats or fucking like mauling them or fucking putting arrows through them, and it's really. So I think that is the one thing that somewhat makes it a bit more like of a really twisted twist. Yeah, is the fact that they're willing to go to such levels that even when they're killing each other, you see even deeper how lacking and emotional they must feel. Even when we've got scenes of like the dad dying and things like that, it's like. You really must be so fucking self-involved that you are not more emotionally affected by this. What I mean?
So to kind of jump through to when the dad dies, Kelly, the Bellend brothers' wife, kind of flees the house and she goes to the neighbours. And that's where we find out, though, actually they've killed the neighbours, so the neighbour can't be reached for help, and it's all kind of...
I love that shot of the dead guy still on the sofa.
Still listening to
the music's still repeating. The music's still going off. You know.
And she gets a good
like it is this is why the choice of music is not, because all I'm going to is like, you didn't start the fire. It was all like, that's what's now playing, because you said Billy
all the
Joel
longest time. A cappella.
Completely different vibe and tone to
different movie. But she gets the the golf swing into the head with the axe, which is
I love when she's thrown through the glass and when she's like struggling on the ground. It feels very these guys in the animal, like, I think they do feel very imposing.
They do.
I think they do come across as quite scary because they just seem so militaristic, don't they? Like they are they are willing to just like, they've done a job, so they don't really care how, and you kind of sometimes feel like they're really taking enjoyment, like the way he just sits on the sofa after she's gone. Yeah, he's just like having a chill for a minute.
Well, it's a weird thing because they feel very very imposing, and then like instantly the next minute they almost don't. It's a really weird like juxtaposition.
I think it's once Eren starts basically kicking out
exactly.
that they really feel
that
a bit more like they're not as strong as they
But it's interesting because this is obviously after the strangers, and the strangers kind of introduced these three people and almost had them being a little bit like unbeatable. It had them kind of being these mysterious people who can follow you and can sneak around you, and they're always one step ahead. And these guys, I don't know what to call them, the sneaky lads, the animals, they feel like that. They feel like they're one step ahead, and they you have the scene where he's sat on the sofa and you're like, oh fucking hell, these guys are chilling.
Like axe for a head, he's just staring at it like
just chilling. And then Erin kills one with, I think she stabs one in the arm and then she tenderizes
the fucking bam, 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 bam.
Which is amazing.
The back of his head.
But the moment that really kind of flips it for me is when the dad kind of he's going upstairs and he looks in that cupboard and he finds the sleeping bag.
I really love that.
I love
shot.
that.
The fact that it's like that they've been hiding away in this the whole time. Again, gave me that kind of that they are some kind of like a unit of like almost like army military kind of people who've been like hired in, but then at the same time, like you said about the thing, like with the Aaron thing, I quite like the fact that it's they go from these imposing figures to actually just. You guys caught us off guard.
Yeah.
When we actually go hand to hand, you guys are not actually that strong. So you might not be actually maybe army or military. You're just a bunch of dudes.
You might just be friends.
Yeah, you might just be dudes that have just been hired to, you've got weapons and stuff, which is making you powerful. But the second we know you're there,
the
actually you're not so much.
Because the dad's death, and this is the bit that made me be like, this is really kind of fucking callous, is when he kind of says to Felix and C, and he's like, they've been waiting for us. This is planned. It's not just a random thing. And then one of the guys with the masks comes up behind him and just slits his throat.
Yeah.
And then they're obviously watching him. They're watching him die. And that's the twist where you find out that Felix and C are the ones who have orchestrated this whole thing.
Yeah.
And there's this horridness of like what you realizing that you've been betrayed as you're dying, watching your dad die that you've betrayed, but then the guy comes into the room where the dad has fallen over and died, and Felix says something to him like, "Oh, did you have to do that in front of me?" And the guy like just takes his headphones out, and he's just listening to music whilst killing this,
and that callous nature of
it's mental,
This is like literally like slaughtering. Well, they are like the animals, the lambs, the foxes, but they literally they are all basically animals that quite often get hunted and killed, and they are basically the hunters. And it's like that. That's what I kind of liked about the animal choices as well. Is that animals are quite often brutally murdered, hunted, or like sliced like lambs, often sliced by the neck, in certain ritualistics and things like that. So I quite like the fact that they are the hunted. Well, I liked it to a certain point. I thought about that, but I did also remember one of them's a tiger, so I was like, that doesn't work.
That doesn't work. I mean,
I wish you would have thought a little bit more about
tigers
that.
Tigers are an endangered species.
They are.
So technically,
they are so hunted by poachers, but still, it's. But I still like the idea of the animal twisting onto them. But the fact that actually underneath they're just guys who just they literally seem to give no fucks about the fact that they're just killing these people.
I think this is
that's a scarier element. I think that humanity can sometimes be so lacking in. Money drives people. Yeah. And the fact that people are so willing, like his own family, his own son is willing to fucking stab like so many things into him to be like one after the other. Like he's literally he's panicking, but he's just literally stabbing tools into his own dad.
His own brother.
And yet he's still like, fuck it, I don't really
care.
I don't really, he's acting like he does, but he's in a very psychopathic kind of way of but at the same time, I'll stab you all day for money, money, money. This is $1 million, another million, another million. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We get the scene where we find out why Erin's so locked in, and she's setting up the nail traps around the windows, which is fucking great. But she says to Z that, and this is the bit that kind of irked me. I always said is that we don't really know anything about Erin. We know that she's this badass. And when shit's kicking off, she keeps a cool head, that kind of thing. However, she's just all of a sudden oh yeah, my dad was a doomsday prepper, and he thought that the world was fucked, so he taught me how to survive. Yeah. And then it's just don't worry about that. Whereas I feel and I remember watching this the first time, and I was like, what are the chances? That's so random. And I would have liked it because they have there's conversations about the family. And there's conversations with Crispin where he's talking about his family, and it's almost so one-sided that I feel if Erin had maybe started to kind of pepper throughout, she had this weird upbringing, and that her dad was a survivalist and all of this stuff, I feel it would have kind of been a bit better and been a bit more of a foreshadowing, as opposed to Z just going how do you know how to do all of this? And she's just my dad thought that the world was going to end and I'd need to know how to put nails in and kill people. It feels so random.
I get that. I mean, it seemed like it was going to be obviously. I more expected a more obvious, I felt, explanation was just to be because she's somewhat old enough that she could be ex-army or ex-military, and she's just, that's what she did before she moved over to America. You know what I mean? Like, that's what she was previously. I feel like that is a much easier, more straightforward than having to have the whole. I was survivalist. And my dad was this, and my dad was this.
The Terminator.
I know that necessarily being in the military army does not mean that you are that much of a badass at all these things. But I think at the same time, your dad growing up as a survivalist doesn't necessarily mean that you'd know all of that stuff at the same time, or you'd be good at it, kind of thing. Yeah. Whereas at least in the other one, you would have literally had to have fully been like trained to be good at this, trained to be good at survival. I feel like that would have been a more like straightforward answer. I'm not saying it wouldn't be like as interesting, but we don't really hang around on anything long enough in this film to really it's pretty much like, yep, that's it.
Let's get to the next part.
Let's move on. Let's get because then we get obviously Felix.
Which is interesting. I feel like he learned from that with The Guest, because The Guest feels like it's got a bit more characterization in it. If anything, The Guest feels as if it's large chunks of characterization, and then shit hits the fan.
It is much more. That's much more of a balanced kind of, somewhat horror elements with that kind of mainly that kind of thriller kind of run throughout of this is about what's happening here and what's going on. Whereas this one is a little bit more like just go. But then I guess is the fact that if this was like very heavy on that, you would feel like it was too bogged down.
Maybe, potentially. Because
I think this invasion, I think it feels more real to the situation, that you're not just going to have these long... And if anything, it's one of the things that always pisses me off in some of these, is the fact that these people are coming to your house and yet they're willing to just sit around and have long conversations with you. Is one of the things that normally irks me about like some of these kind of invasion ones or things like that, is that they're willing to have like a good some 20-minute break while they're breaking and you're breaking, when their intention was to come into the house and fucking kill you, right? So just fucking kill them.
I guess,
get on with it.
They want to get stuck in.
They want to end it quickly so they can get to the money part of it. So it feels very natural that actually there's not really a lot of time for them to talk and get on with it, things like that. So I guess what he's trying to do at the beginning of the film is very clearly just state these people are not the greatest of people. There's some kind of questions that are unanswered, and we're going to answer them very quickly, but we're going to answer them a little bit. But we've got to get on with it, and I want to get to the kills, and you guys watching probably want to get
to the kills as well. I mean, it does move through things quite quickly because and Aaron goes.
It also allows it not to have to land so long on when you're with low budget. You sometimes are more about how the ability of your actors to always pull off exactly what you want them to. So let's not linger too long that you can start to be like, you can't really pull this off, can you, actor? Not saying that about it. There's lots of people who are actually
cast.
The cast is actually pretty strong considering the budget of and thinking about the actors available. It's all a pretty good, strong group of actors within this. But it's just one of those things that always comes. We've seen plenty of ones where actually the gore and stuff is fantastic, but the acting's dog shit. Where they haven't thought about both sides of it. So I think he's got a fairly good balance going on here.
And I think he uses the cast well especially for what some of them are in. I don't think Ty West is ever going to win an Oscar, but the part that he's in is fun, and it's quite good. And then the same with Wendy Glenn as C. She kind of does play this bit of a shitty kind of one you got to keep your eye on, quiet, lurking in the corner. That she's scheming. She's up to no good. I think AJ Bowen, who plays Crispin, I think he's really good in it. I've seen him in I'm just looking at his Wikipedia now. And he's done quite a lot of horror. I recognise him from The House of the Devil. He was also in Hatchet 2, which I've seen, but I don't remember him being in that. He did The Sacrament as well, which was another Ty West film. The Guest, I don't remember him being in The Guest, but apparently he was in The Guest.
No, I mean Adam Wingard seems to stick with quite a few of his quite closely. So, but he as Crispin does a pretty good job of making him seem. And again, like I said, it's not like it's like overwhelmingly obvious that his character is thing. He's quite conflicted and stuff like that. He almost seems too much like a wimp character. You know what I mean? He seems too lacking in thing to be the one behind this kind of thing, which is why I think his twist on him being one is much more like, oh, okay, than it is with Felix and Z, who seem much more... They already even talk about the characters like as if Felix is up to shit all the time. Like, of course you'd know about that. Of course you'd know about the blocker for the for the signal and stuff like that. They're like, you'd know that. So you already get the idea that he is a bit into like, into trouble all the time.
Up to no bloody good.
But one thing I do like is that you do get a little bit of that kind of Home Alone like traps, like when they're doing the nails on the ground and stuff like that.
Nails in the boards.
You get the old lamb comes through the window and straight into one of them, and you're thinking very Home Alone, like fuck, like you're stepping into nail through his foot into another one. It's like nice.
Yeah, and you think next he's gonna
and you like you don't know anything about these like who's under the mask and things like that, as it pretty much mainly should be. And you are just like, so you guys deserve pain and suffering for what you're doing.
You deserve it. You should you should pour boiling oil on them, because there's that bit where she boils the oil to get ready.
And you're waiting for what's coming.
Waiting for it to be coming. And that's great when it pays off later.
Because there's a bit when Felix gets it lobbed at, but it's not that.
It's not hot.
It's not the hot one. It's like, that wasn't even hot.
And then he slips.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I remember, I see, like, it's funny. But I seem to remember there being more moments of that,
that kind of
like,
playfulness, kind of like that kind of as if we're playing into there's a little bit of a Home Alone-y kind of fun here. Like it is one of those that is one thing I thought that some of them were played up a little bit more like that, like you didn't expect that, you didn't like in that kind of slightly more fun way, I guess. But it's mainly played serious, as we said.
Yeah, it's quite straight laced. So you get like the fight between Z and Felix when they try and kill Erin, and she puts the fucking blender.
I like that. That fucking shoving that, breaking it off and shoving that into his head, and then fucking like, and it goes on for a good. It goes on for a good while, and him just fucking screaming. And Z's knocked out across on the kind of knocked to one side on the floor, and it's fucking like,
and it's done so well because you just like it's not a complete cutaway. And it's not to the point where you see it. It's like you would just see his face, you hear it, and then you see the blood running down. And I think it's the hearing which is the worst part for me. It's like the whizzing. You
can hear the whizzing, but you can also hear it like catching sometimes, like as if it's catching on bone or things like breaking through. It's a really cool death, I thought.
It's fucking wrong.
It's a real cool, and it feels long, which I think is good comeuppance for Felix after all he's done, like Dad and his family and stuff like that.
And then she just fucking bomps Zoe with a knife. See, Zoe, just fucking whomps Z in the head with a knife, which is which is just a short, sweet. To be fair, you don't need another brutal one after that. And this is where we get the Felix reveal. So no, not the Felix, Crispin. Sorry. Yeah. I think all of that coffee is starting to hit. Things are moving, man.
Early morning coffee.
All of that coffee. Doubles. Crispin, he ends up ringing Felix, and he's basically like, I told you I was too much of a wimp to do this. I'm sorry. I couldn't do it. And then she confronts him when he returns, and he's basically kind of saying that like, you were supposed to be the witness. Yeah. You were supposed to be like, oh, okay, like they got a bit beaten up. You was never going to hurt you. You were supposed to be our alibi, basically. And then
it's because he's not like, again, because they take him pretty much out of the picture for a lot. He's the one that he puts himself forward at one point to be the one to go out, and then you never see it again, and everyone just assumes he's dead, and then it almost gets to the point in the film where you kind of forget that Crispin's still out there.
Bit,
So I think that's again why slightly the twist kind of works again, is because you're almost at the point of forgetting him. And you're like, oh yeah, shit, okay. There's Crispin, and then I like the way it's revealed. Like when she, again on the phone, thinking he's speaking to Felix, and he's like, fuck. I was like, oh, okay. And you kind of, I think also through Shani Vincent's performance of like the sun like dawning on her of like shit, but I also love the fact that, again, she just goes, you know, following this, we basically, you know, just go straight into, she's like, well, fuck him then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's the fact that he's so, like, I love the fact that he's basically straight away trying to clearly explain. And she's like, you can almost see in her face, she's like, doesn't really matter. I stop listening. I'm just thinking about, where the fuck do I stab you?
Yeah.
Where am I going to... And it's the fact that she just so brutally just goes, you know, like, he's like, I'm going to explain this thing. And again, proving himself even further to just be a complete little, like, rat of, like, a little kind of weasel, person, man. You know. Like, there's nothing to you. You can't even stand around to see your family dying when you're the one doing it. You're the one hiding off just so that you can come in here. So she doesn't give him any kind of chance to do that, really. He's trying to explain, and she looks like she gives no shits. Yeah. And then just fucking stabs him in the neck and
then eyes him. Yeah. Fucking stabs him in the eye.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
He's like, you deserve to suffer, and that's all. I don't care. You're gonna die. I'm not hanging around. I'm not like, oh yeah, we can justify this.
We can justify.
We'll have all the money. Yeah, we'll take that. No,
so that false. I'm just taking you out, man. And then this is the part of the film where I'm like, I remember liking this when I first watched it.
Yeah.
And then watching it back, I was like, it feels just too random. So she gets shot by a police officer who turns up. You know, he puts one in her shoulder because the police officer saw him kill Crispin.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, you know, she sets up this axe above the door in anticipation that one of them's going to come through and it's going to fucking whomp him in the head.
Yeah.
And having, you know, watching this and for some reason thinking that there was a lot more horror comedy in it, I was like, okay, that's kind of a funny ending.
Yeah.
But then watching it and thinking, actually, this is a relatively straight-laced film. This just feels really slapstick and Looney Tunes. And I watched it and I was like, I don't think I like that ending, you know?
I think the opening felt a little bit to me and the ending feels a little bit, but it's the middle that feels a little bit more straightforward. I don't know. I mean, purely because it is kind of fun and funny, I still kind of liked it. Like, because she's in a situation where she's kind of like, how the hell is she going to get out of this?
Yeah.
She's kind of trapped because he thinks you're the killer. So he's going to take that. And there's not really many ways she can say it. She's already been shot, so you're like, fucking hell, you know, we're going for a darker ending. And then because you think you're getting this fairly serious ending, to then twist it into a somewhat kind of comical kind of little ending, I was okay with it. I don't mind. I think it was quite a cool kind of... I liked the cut. I like the edit of it as well. Yeah. The way it suddenly goes down and straight to
then into your next. Yeah, I don't dislike the edit, but I don't know whether I...
Because Adam Wingard was also the editor on this film. He did the directing and editing on this film.
I just don't know whether I'm into it as a kind of last scene.
Last scene. I think it leaves it on a kind of a fun little note on the end of that. Maybe because, you know... and I think, I mean, to be fair, it even says, if you read about it, that he did kind of originally, like, Simon Barrett, the writer, originally thought this is a mixture on Agatha Christie, like I said. I thought it felt like, and then also screwball comedies kind of thing. So it's that comedy bit that, you're right, does somewhat, I think, once they get into the action. I get the whole, like, people dying in certain ways, but it never really falls quite enough into that kind of, you know, that comedy-ish kind of, like, slapsticky kind of like way. And again, it's weird because it would be a very different film with it kind of thing. We've had other films that are like it, which are always quite hard to balance it perfectly out. So I don't know, like, it's always hard when it's like, if you're going to do the comedy aspect on it, you've got to get that balance right. Otherwise, it either undermines the horror, or it's just not funny. Yeah, and you've got that thing. And there's a lot of films that have tried that and failed with that, like, mixture kind of thing. And for me personally, if you're going to, like, try to do little bits of it, but I prefer you lean more into the seriousness of it, so we're not feeling like every note is undermined. Yeah. Instead of falling more into the slapstick, and then it all feels like there's no levity or weight in this film. To it. Yeah, it's one of those things. It makes me think of like a Marvel film. Yeah, you know, when they've got the jokes and stuff like that, and you're like, sometimes you're watching it and you're like, oh, this is oh, this is actually quite a good emotional scene, and then someone cracks a joke like 5 seconds after it's happening. You're like, and you just killed it. You just killed it. You just killed the weight of that moment. Now all I remember is your stupid fucking joke after that, instead of, you know. And it's one of those things that you've seen quite a few times happen within that universe of, like, why couldn't you just let it happen? Why couldn't you let it be? You know what I mean? Why could you just... do people really need that? No, they don't need that joke dropping 5 seconds afterwards. You know what I mean? Like, just let it stand. And that's why I'd always rather lean towards, if you're going to try and do a bit of both, I'd rather still have the levity of, you have to give it time on those moments that need it. And I'm not saying this film gives anything time, but if they were trying to drop stupid jokes at the same time of it, I also think that would take even more from the time, and then you'd be like, where's that balance coming? Which is why, for me overall, it works quite well as a fast-paced kind of like slasher thriller kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not, for me personally, actually knowing and having seen the majority of Wingard's films at this point, I think structurally this is probably the strongest, because one thing I do find about most of his films is it sometimes feels a bit scatterbrained, a bit all over the place,
I mean, if you
I can't really say for Kong and stuff like that, because that kind of is, but his Kong films are like, and here's this, and here's this, and here, fucking hell, like how many? But even, I really like The Guest, but even The Guest kind of takes some like, feels on a structure and then feels like it just throws it out the window in the final act and kind of goes all that, which it still works, like it still hits the landing, but it still structurally feels a bit like which way you stick it with. This one felt more like it was
a smoother ride.
Stayed with the same idea and pretty much let it go right to the end, instead of being like, we need to really fucking mix this up or play with it or make it really insane, or we need to add in another universe or another sci-fi element like in Kong to make it all work together, or that seems to work. We need some comedy.
I don't know. I think it's just that that very end bit for me just feels as if like you've had a relatively serious film, and then like somebody just like sneaks in, just like fucking rips ass, It felt like it was just an unnecessary bit of comedy for a film that didn't really have much black comedy in it.
Maybe not nearly as much as it maybe thinks it is. That kind of thing. Like, it's not really there. But I guess at the same time, I still think, luckily, it doesn't undermine the fact that although it's serious, I think it's fast-paced enough that it's still fun.
Yeah.
That you still feel like you're getting enough depth, you're getting enough stuff, enough comeuppance of characters that you want to get comeuppance. A twist that I think, kind of, and I guess maybe somewhat only... Maybe the reason it kind of works is because, again, it was so fast-paced in certain parts that you almost forget that certain things had happened. Like, you're like, we've already moved on to a death, so I forgot what that character just said. Or I forgot the way that character's acting oddly obvious, which might be why it kind of passed the brains the first time.
Is
that actually we're too focused on like, when's that next death coming? Actually, we're not really focusing on what a character, because we're thinking this is a family that's just being hunted by people for some reason, kind of thing. Instead of, they're in the house already, the killers.
The calls coming from inside.
So I guess it depends, as if for you, did the that slight comedy thing, that ending, those little bits that weren't quite swing, did that eschew you enough to be like, you don't think it should be a must-see horror?
I don't know. I think like I'm trying to decide whether I think it is a must-see horror, because I think it's a tricky one. There is a lot that I do like about it. I think it's paced very well. I think the performances are good. I think it does have some moments where it feels like it does labour a little bit, but that's kind of once we get revealed. Once we get those first very quick deaths out of the way, we start to almost like set up for the next attack, and she starts putting the traps down, that kind of thing. It does feel like there's a bit of a lull in the film then. I don't know whether I think it is. I think I'm going to take it, as much as I enjoy the film, I'm going to have to go with the gut decision that tells me that the fact that I'm on the fence should indicate that I'm not on board. I think it's a good film. I think it's fun. I'd recommend it to people. I think of the home invasion films, I think it's probably one of the better ones, but I feel as if like my ambivalence to let it be in the club means that it's no, it's not. It can come to the evening do, but it's not being invited to the day ceremony. So no, I'm going to say it's not a must-see horror. Over to you.
I think I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with must see horror. I think I remember being so not sure about this the first time I went to watch it that it surprised me enough that it lingered in the brain enough. It has enough scenes, including the final act shot kind of thing, but enough scenes with like certain characters or deaths and stuff that lingered in the brain enough that I remember thinking I enjoyed it. And this time, again, there's lots of times I've rewatched horror films and then been like, oh, actually, that wasn't nearly as good as I thought it would be. And although a little bit of that initial kind of twisty-turny has kind of been lost, I still kind of enjoyed it. And I also think for what is a fairly modern slasher and a low-budget film, I think that this one's actually quite zippy and fun and kind of gives you what you want from a slasher and a home invasion one, when, you know, for the most part, I'd say quite a lot of them sadly don't always work. Yeah. You know, and we've kind of crossed the point now where definitely we're in the point where if we still make more of them now, they rarely ever work. Yeah. But at this point, they were quite, you know, with strangers and stuff like that, they were quite
hot property.
And you know, and I think maybe, you know, something like The Strangers, for instance, was a little bit more dark and maybe a little bit more like psychological in its effect, and maybe slightly stronger. I think that this is more in terms of like a fun little one to watch, and thinking of more modern kind of ones that are actually like really strong in terms of this genre. I think it just about slips in there. It wouldn't be in the tops, you know, but I think it would be as we're getting down to our lower kind of, you know, last kind of, you know, 80s or whatever, if you're about 100, I think I'd still just about sneak it in. And also comparing to other must-see horrors that we've had in our mind, I think this one had enough strong points in my mind that it sneaks on through compared to ones I've been like, no, because there were just too many structural problems or too many things that felt underwhelming or didn't help. I can't say I felt any of that enough that I'd be like, it doesn't deserve that spot. And I think it does rely solely for a lot of this on mainly kind of the actors doing their thing and just kind of quite tight editing and direction by Adam Wingard here, that I think it feels like you feel on the same pace, the same track throughout the whole film. Mainly, you know, with only like a few little lulls here and a few little kind of does that work moments, one or two, but for the most part, it's pretty kind of straightforward, strong horror filmmaking here. And I think there's a reason why it's got a cult following and why this one kind of helped launch Adam Wingard, you know, back into like or started him into a mainstream kind of view with people. Right. But yeah, that's my must-see horror. I think we've split our decisions.
We split again, but it's going to happen, isn't it? You know, it can't. We can't agree on everything.
We haven't got an official list of these, so we're at this point. We're like, which ones did we do? By the time we end this, we'll revisit them and be like, we changed our mind on all of this. We're gonna have to start again because this went wrong.
I mean, just repeat and recycle.
We'll have to have an actual rundown at some point of like what ones we have or haven't decided. See who's more on must, who's got more must, and who's got less.
Who's must and who's bust. Yeah. I mean, the CMTH boys are divided. You know, united we stand, divided we fall. We shall see if that rings true. Come and let us know if your next is a must-see horror or not. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at CMTH Podcast. Either hashtag Team Must or hashtag Team Bust. And remember to hit that subscribe button and please leave us a lovely review. We will see you next week. Take care. Goodbye. Don't scheme to kill your family. And we shall see you soon.